Let me ask you something. When you hear the word stroke, what's the first image that pops into your head? Yeah, for most people, it's probably someone a lot older. But today, we're going to completely take that stereotype apart. We're diving into the stories of young survivors, and a reality that is way, way more common than you might think.
Here it is, the number that changes the entire conversation. The Stroke Association UK found that 1 out of every 4 strokes happens to people of working age or younger. Think about that for a second. That's not some rare exception. That's a huge, significant number that challenges everything we thought we knew about who's at risk.
And this is the universal reaction. Melody McMurray, who was just 21 when she had a stroke, said this, and her words capture that feeling of complete and utter disbelief. It's a feeling echoed by almost every single young survivor. This can't be happening to me. This doesn't happen to people my age.
So, let's start their stories where they all begin, at that sudden, shocking moment that drew a line in the sand between the life they knew and the one that was about to begin. You know, the first obstacle is yourself. The idea that you're too young for a stroke is so deeply ingrained that the first signs are almost always brushed off. Melody thought her speech was slurring just because she was tired. So many others think it's just a bad headache. It's this dangerous self-misdiagnosis that becomes the first chapter in so many of their stories. But fighting your own denial is just the first part of the battle. Even when a young person knows something is seriously wrong and seeks help, they often smash into a second, even more shocking obstacle, a medical system that can be just as dismissive as they were. And this is the trauma of not being believed. Take Andrew Baker's story. He was told he just had an atypical migraine and was actually sent home. It was only because he refused to leave and insisted on a scan that they discovered he'd had a major stroke. We see this pattern again and again. Doctors overlooking the classic FAST signs: face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty, time to call for help, simply because the person in front of them doesn't fit the picture of a typical stroke patient.
And that feeling of being totally out of place follows them right into recovery. Ailie, who is 21, explains that even in her rehab sessions, people thought she was a volunteer or a researcher. Can you imagine trying to heal and recover in a place where your very presence makes no sense to anyone? It's this incredibly deep and painful kind of isolation.
This feeling of being an invisible patient just builds and builds, leading to the longest and maybe most misunderstood part of their journey, the fight against invisible injuries. This really gets to the heart of the struggle. On the outside, a young survivor might look totally fine, completely recovered, but on the inside, they are waging a war against crippling neuro-fatigue, a constant cognitive fog, and overwhelming sensory overload. It's this exhausting, invisible battle that friends, family, and even employers just don't see or understand.
And if you really want to understand what that fatigue feels like, this quote from Ailie says it all. This isn't just about being tired. This is a level of exhaustion so profound that a simple everyday task like taking a shower can wipe you out completely. It's one of the most common and life-changing effects that nobody can see.
So you've got to be wondering, why? Why does this happen to people who are young, who are often perfectly healthy? Well, the causes are often very different than in older people. And because of that, the consequences mean their entire lives have to be completely recalibrated. Yeah, unlike strokes in older adults that are often tied to things like high blood pressure or cholesterol, strokes in young people are frequently caused by hidden conditions they never even knew they had. For Letisha, it was a tiny hole in her heart. For Christy, it was a rare vascular condition. For others, it could be a tangle of blood vessels in the brain, or, like in Melody's case, a perfect storm of hormonal birth control and an autoimmune disease. And these underlying causes lead to lifelong problems that force huge adaptations. Letisha's vision loss means she can't drive anymore, a loss of independence that she misses every day. For Christy, it's living with chronic pain. For so many, that neuro-fatigue means changing careers or cutting back on hours. Others have to basically outsource their short-term memory to their phones. It's so clear that for these young people, recovery isn't about getting back to their old life. It's about the monumental job of building a brand new one from scratch.
This journey through isolation and having to rebuild your entire life is, as you can imagine, incredibly difficult. But for many, there's a real turning point, the moment they finally find a way to break that cycle of loneliness.
Letisha's words just perfectly capture that deep sense of grief and isolation that is so common. You're trying to figure out this terrifying new reality, and you feel like you are the only person on the planet going through it. You're not just healing your body, you're grieving the life, the career, the person you used to be. And that is exactly why finding a community is so unbelievably critical. Christy, who was 19 when she had her stroke, says one of her biggest regrets is that she waited almost 10 years to connect with other young survivors. They call it a golden resource, that first time you talk to someone who just gets it. No explanation needed. That connection, it's often the spark that ignites the final, and maybe the most remarkable, stage of this journey, transforming a personal trauma into a powerful collective purpose. This is what post-traumatic growth looks like in real life. Survivors like Letisha take their own devastating experience and turn it into a mission. They become the advocates, the support system, the resource that they desperately wish they'd had, all to make sure the next person who has to walk this path doesn't have to do it alone. And you see this same story arc play out again and again. It starts with grieving everything that was lost. Then you move into a slow, hard-won acceptance of this new reality. After that comes the crucial step, connecting with a community that understands. And finally, you find this powerful new identity in helping others navigate the same storm. And the advice from people who've actually walked this path, it's so powerful because it's so simple. Letisha's advice to other survivors is to be patient with yourself, to give yourself grace and time to heal. And above all, to reach out. Don't wait. Don't try to do it all in silence. So when you look at it, the story of the young stroke survivor is one of incredible resilience in the face of being totally invisible to the system. It teaches us that recovery is so much more than just physical healing. It's about the massive task of rebuilding a life, of rebuilding an identity. And it leaves us with a really important question. What can we do to make sure these survivors are seen, that they're believed, and that they get connected, so they don't just survive, but actually find a way to thrive?